So I thought today I'd talk a little bit about how to plant a polytunnel for maximum productivity all year round. And I kind of hesitate really talking about how to, because there are so many different ways to plant a polytunnel depending on what you like to eat and the weather conditions and all that sort of thing. But this is an example, and I've got a few other examples as well that you can take a look at. I'll put some links in the description. I've got a little ebook and one of the chapters in that is all about growing under cover and polytunnel planting and things like that as well. So there's quite a few other resources in addition to this video. But basically what it comes down to is lots and lots of successions. So hopefully you'll get that idea, and also growing at different levels. Anyway, let's take a look. So I'm recording this on the 7th of April, and the polytunnel is pretty full, and it's been fuller than this, and it's going to get a lot fuller than this. We squeeze a lot of stuff in, but it's kind of a nice time to do a tour and just talk about some of the principles of planting, because there's a lot going on in here. And you'll see, one of the points I wanted to make is multi-level planting. So you can see the strawberries up there. We'll talk about those in a minute. And then we've got another shelf here, and then we've got trestle tables, and we can have also trestle tables all the way along here. Again, more stuff up high, and then lots of stuff obviously down in the beds, but then loads of things in containers. And things are in containers because they're only in here for a short period of time, and then they move outside. And so certain things live their whole life in the polytunnel, but anything in the containers pretty much is just here for a few months. So let's take a look at some examples of successions, and we'll start with these carrots. So these carrots were sown late October, early November, and they'll be harvested in April and May, and then in June we'll put tomatoes in these, and then when the tomatoes finish in late October, early November, we'll put carrots in them again. So this bed was a spinach bed, so the whole bed down here was spinach, and you can still see some last bits and pieces of spinach in here. But there's absolutely no point having spinach in a polytunnel at this time, because it's so much better outside in a cold frame. And so we're progressively clearing the spinach and interplanting it with new things. So for example, here we interplanted with beetroot, and now the beetroot's being a bit crowded out by the spinach, so we'll take all of this spinach out, and then once we've cleared the spinach, everywhere where there's a spinach plant at the moment, we'll stick 3 parsnip seeds, and so they'll germinate. And then when we harvest this beetroot for baby beets in May, then we will leave the parsnips to grow on, and the parsnips will only go about sort of this far back, because at the back there, all the way along the back there, in late May, mid to late May, will go the tomatoes. So everything, kind of half the bed, is planted with things other than tomatoes, and the back part is just all tomatoes. So these beetroot were interplanted with spinach, and I took the spinach out only about a week ago really, and you can already see that the growth on this beetroot is better than the growth on that. Well, hopefully you can. Now I will then start interplanting this beetroot, not with parsnips this time, but with radishes, and I'll be doing that in about a week's time. And then down here, this again was all spinach, and now it's turnips, and these turnips will be out sometime in May and still get replanted again. And there's all sorts of planting opportunities. Maybe I might put carrots in here, I may put some more parsnips in here, I may put some more beetroot in here, particularly golden beetroot or something like that. Just the list is endless opportunities. But then all of this bed will probably get replanted to lettuce in October, early October, and then it'll be lettuce all the way through until sort of February time, and then that'll get interplanted with something else. So let's take a look at another interplant here. So here we've got beetroot that was interplanted with radish, and we've got the radish in here. Most of this radish has been harvested. This whole bed here that had spinach in it was also interplanted with radish. All that's been harvested now. And here we've got spinach interplanted with Brussels sprouts, which are being grown just for these beautiful leaves. Absolutely fantastic spring green. I think way better than cabbage. Really prolific. Cut and come again, basically. You know, the more you harvest it, the more greens you seem to get. So down here we had lettuce. This was planted in December, and it was interplanted with spring onions, and now almost all the lettuce has been harvested. The spring onions are going to be harvested in a few days, and then this area here is all going to be planted with celery, and then that celery will be harvested as a cut and come again crop all the way through until, well, it could go all the way through until sort of February March time, but in my case I generally clear it about October, when again I replant probably with lettuce. And there's the celery just ready to be planted out today. And then this is another lettuce bed planted in October and interplanted again with spring onions. And then in February time, in the gaps between the lettuces, we put calabrese, and this calabrese now is doing beautifully. I think there's a few cauliflowers in there as well, but it's just starting to flower, and so that will be harvested in May. And of course all these lettuces now underneath here, they're all pretty much finished, so we'll just probably do one last harvest of these in a few days time, and leave these spring onions for about another week or two, and then we'll take those out as well. So I'm not a fan of putting brassicas in the polytunnel over winter, but I really love putting them in February, and I generally start them at the beginning of January under grow lights, but you can, if you want, start them in October under natural light. And I just keep them up here on this shelf, effectively like similar to all these little brassicas up here, and as I said, I plant them out in February and they grow into these beauties. We'll harvest the leaves off these because these are gorgeous steamed, and obviously the calabrese heads themselves. So then we've got more carrots, and again these will all be tomatoes in containers by June. Now actually, because though June is quite late for tomatoes, they'll probably actually be planted with side shoots from my most vigorous tomatoes that are being planted in the ground. At 6 weeks this bed looks radically different to how it looks now. As I said, it's going to be all tomatoes all along the back. That shelf will obviously have gone, just on clips. And then all the way down the front here, as I said, there'll be all sorts of different plants, you know, maybe some beetroot, carrots, turnips, radish, lettuce, parsnips, all sorts of things. Any ideas? Give me those. Basically anything you can grow outside pretty much in summer, you can also grow in a polytunnel, especially if, like me, you leave the doors open all the time to keep the temperature between 70 and 80 degrees, which is what tomatoes really like, and pretty much everything else will grow well in that temperature as well. So let's take a look at up here. So these are strawberries. We brought these strawberries in from outside in late January. We normally bring them in early February, but just the weather was just so foul, I just thought I'll bring them in. And they're doing beautifully now. You can just see the strawberries forming on them, so we'll be eating those in early May. These are my first early strawberries, and by about July, which is kind of the time when they're getting in the way of the tomatoes, then we'll take those out and leave them outside and take runners off them, and those runners will be what makes the strawberries next year. So I use this little shelf for a lot of my seedlings. These are only the hardy ones. All the tomatoes and peppers and things like that, they're back home where I can keep them a bit warmer. But nice little selection of onions and leeks and things here. Now we're self-sufficient in veg, and so we need to make sure that we can bring crops on really early, because we will start to run out of onions in about the end of April, early May time. And it's not just a matter of running out, it's a matter of can you keep them healthy beyond that sort of time, and we can't, because they start to sprout because it just gets too warm in our store for them, and so we need some onions to replace them. So we've got this little tiny bed here of onions, and these will see us through May and early June, and then the ones outside will be ready. So we just get a slightly early crop. These are all interplanted with garlic, and we'll start harvesting this garlic probably in early May. This is green garlic, so we want to harvest it when it's immature, and there's actually a lot of garlic in here. Every alternate row is garlic. So then we've got another example here of a lettuce bed with spring onions interplanted, and then down the centre I harvested every other lettuce and popped in these cauliflowers, and again I did that in late January, early February, and these will be harvested again sometime in May, again just before tomatoes go in this bed, and tomatoes will be interplanted again with summer crops. Parsley we popped in October. We've been harvesting this obviously continuously since about November, December time, and it's looking pretty good. And then more cauliflowers down here, and then we get down here to the early garlic. So it's a slight little bit of shade from the trestle table here, but it's still looking really good. And so we're hoping for a slightly early crop. It's planted quite densely because we'll take out every other plant again for green garlic, just to leave the bigger ones to grow on. And it's a similar sort of story to the onions. We'll start running out of garlic in a few weeks' time, then we switch over to green garlic, then we get the early crop from the polytunnel, and then we get the main crop from outside. So the ends of the polytunnel are kind of storage areas, and so there's nothing to be shaded underneath there, so that's where I tend to start things like my carrots. So I've got 6 tubs of carrots here for harvesting in early summer. I've got some cuttings and things like that. Basically I just have these trestle tables just to drop stuff on, temporary stuff, you know, like I've got some lettuces here and things like that, spare ones after I've done my planting, just waiting to see if I lose any. But these are not here for a long time, so I want as much light getting through this trestle table to the garlic as I can. So then let's take a look at all these containers. So I'm going to be putting courgettes in here, and I wrap them up with bubble wrap so that they're protected from the early frosts. I'm putting French and runner beans in these, so we'll be harvesting those sort of late May. and then we move these containers outside. So the courgettes and the beans go outside in June. We've got potatoes here. These are my second early potatoes. The early ones are back home, but these are ready now, some of these. So the first succession are ready. These are always done in succession, because the later you sow your potatoes, your early potatoes, the bigger the yield. So there's no point sowing them all in February sort of thing and then getting a low yield from all of them. It's better to sow the first two in the first week of February, the second two in the second week of February, etc., etc. And these, any of these that are not ready will go outside probably in May, mid-May, once this risk of frost has gone, or even maybe slightly before the risk of frost has gone. I'll just pop a bit of fleece over them. More courgettes. These are actually the courgettes here that I'm going to be planting today. And another courgette in there, and another beans, some more beans in there. And so you see there's probably quite a bit of space here. Well, that's where the deck chairs go, so that we can sit in here and chill out. So I hope that gives you a kind of rough idea of how we plant the polytunnel. And yeah, and we can, you know, part of this is enabled because we've got a lot of outside space, which is cold frames and low tunnels. So we kind of try to optimize the crops to the environment. So most of the spinach is in cold frames, most of the lettuce is in the polytunnel, most of the early brassicas are in low tunnels outside, things like that. So we're kind of just trying to get like the earliest crops in here, or the crops that really benefit from a low humidity environment. This is a lot lower humidity than the cold frames and the low tunnels outside, for example. And so things like lettuce, which don't do very well if the humidity is higher, are really good in the polytunnel. Spinach, which doesn't seem to care, is fine outside in cold frames. So a little bit more about hanging baskets. I've got quite a lot of hanging baskets outside just prepared, and they will go on these hooks up here, and I've got loads of those hooks on these crop bars, and that's where things like some of my tender low volume crops will go. So things like cucamelons, early crop of golden purslane, things like that. And you might see that I've kind of got doing a crazy experiment here with carrots in in hanging baskets, which I've never done before, but I really am looking. I've got all these hanging baskets which I could potentially plant up in August time with carrots for a baby carrot crop in early winter, baby carrots for salads. So I'm just trying it out with these to see if I can get lots of little baby carrots. Who knows? So here's an example of one of my outdoor spinach beds, harvested 20 times already since about November, and that's all interplanted with turnips. So when the spinach goes to seed, we've got something in here, and then this bed will be peppers. So here's another example of a bed with early Brussels sprout leaves, and down the end there early cauliflowers. And here's another example of an earlier succession of calabrese, and these are coming on quite nicely. And then early beetroot. These are not going to be harvested for baby beets like the ones in the polytunnel. These will grow into full-size beets, and these are all interplanted with onions. And you'll notice that I don't have any peas in the polytunnel, and that's because peas like it cool. The polytunnel's too warm for them, so I have my first succession of peas in this little low tunnel, lettuces interplanted with turnips. And then here's my second early strawberries under this little coal frame, interplanted with main crop garlic. And then here's an example of carrots that were sown in August and grew on in the polytunnel to maturity, and now they're outside because they're fully grown, and this is our last batch of last year's carrots, really. And when these are finished in a couple of weeks' time, we'll be eating the ones that you've just seen in the polytunnel. So if you're interested in growing all year round and growing under cover, polytunnel gardening, then take a look at my little ebook. The link is in the description below, and you'll find the section on growing under cover in the basics section, and in here you'll find lots more videos and good coverage of most of the main topics, why you grow under cover, pests, wind, rain, snow, considerations of heat and light and things like that, and different types of covers that you can use, just from mesh to fleece to cloches, low tunnels, high tunnels, etc, etc. And also in this book, if you're interested in year-round growing, there's a whole series of guides to growing various different things all year round. The topics in green are finished. Some of the others in amber are part complete. The ones in red haven't been written yet. And if you're interested more in the interplanting ideas, then it's just worth taking a look at some of the advanced growing techniques that I cover in this section as well. So I hope you like this quick video. My name's Steve, this is the Seaside Kitchen Garden and Allotment channel, and I'll see you soon.